All right. Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Dorsey's Resource. We're now going live. Greetings to you all. Welcome, family. First, before we get started, as usual, I'd like to give a disclaimer. This video is for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Please understand everyone's individual circumstance or situation may be different. It's up to every individual competent person to please do his or her own homework and research regarding the matter being discussed. This information is not to be construed as legal advice. In the event you feel you need to seek a competent professional, it is encouraged that you do so at one's own leisure. Dorsey's Resource channel is not liable or responsible for any misuse of this information. These are simply my opinions on the topic being discussed. Everyone is responsible for their own affairs. All rights are reserved. Now, the topic of this video is going to be, I wanted to discuss, it's going to be called Double Entry Bookkeeping, Decedent Estate Lost at Sea. I wanted to discuss, this is redemption education for my followers out there who like the information, that truly want to learn the true aspect of redemption, the legitimate side, not the hearsay out there, kind of like the Mythbusters. This information is real. It is very, very powerful type of information that's hidden, kept very secret. And I've discussed this before, and I'm going to go into the details to give you guys an idea. Also, feel free, the few that are watching, to chime in if you have any statements you would like, any remarks, questions, or comments. Now is the best time to ask me questions, to address any concerns that you may have so far. And this is a lot of the videos, even if you don't see it in the description, this is also Q&A. So don't hesitate. If I do have enough time, I will try to get in the chat section and answer you guys' statements and go over the statements and questions. So accounting, what's happening is you are already familiar with the legal person from the previous video that I did called the in lingus. The in lingus, a lot of times you may not know you're doing business as. This legal person you're doing business as has an account on the private side. So the reason I brought accounting into it, you have a dual-based system. It's called double entry bookkeeping. Just to give you an idea, that's in accounting. There's a public side version and there's a private side of accounting that's hidden, by the way. And there's actually a company, a corporation, I believe Gene Keating mentioned some of this just to piggyback off of some of his research. Payne and Weber, maybe a company, and there's another company I think based out of England, and what they do is they audit the banks, the private side books. There's another set of accounting books they have, if you've heard of that. So you have assets versus your liabilities. You have a dual ledger system. This is the same, no different, very similar to public versus private, statutory versus non-statutory. You have like an accounting, you have accounts payable versus accounts receivable. You also have something called the notes payable ledger, which I'm still learning some of this information myself, but just to give you guys an idea. So the legal person is what's also referred to as the in lingus in the court system. Some you all call it the straw man. They don't recognize certain terminologies in the court, by the way. They speak, they use legalese, which I've explained prior. Chris Smith says, greetings, Dorsey. Appreciate you, Chris Smith. Thank you for joining. Appreciate you. So as you guys, many of you all obviously know, some who will see this video afterwards, that they use within the court system in lingus, and I spelled it. If you look at how it's spelled, I encourage you all to look up the definitions, the different encyclopedias that you have. Also, the Black's Law Dictionary. Balancing the books, it is also referred to as in the estate. And what happens is that many times we don't know because of the process with the birth certificate, when our parents unknowingly signed us over as wardens of the state, because the hospital had so much time where the doctor has X amount of days to get that certificate signed. I've actually talked to couples that have had children before, even though I don't have any children, but I've talked to people, several people that told me in particular when they were going through the process and how they felt like they were being rushed, because the doctor has a certain amount of days, and then after that the hospital has a certain amount of time to get that over to the I believe the county before it's sent to the Department of Health at the state level, Department of Vital Statistics. Then from there, there's a process it goes through to the Department of Commerce and also the Federal Reserve Bank, where they issue, from what I understand, a loan where they pledge you as collateral against the debt. This is not mythology, as there's individuals out there who have you believe that this redemption education is fairy tale. And credit to the people in years past that did research on this information, even though they may not have had all of the pieces. The technology has gotten better throughout the years. So credit, I'm going to name a lot of the pioneers in the movement. Just doesn't mean just because some of them may have gone to jail. There's various reasons. But remember, people learn a lot of this information when they go to jail. Sometimes people come out more proficient, by the way. But kudos to Winston Shrout, Patrick Devine, David Clarence, Dr. Sam Kennedy, Kevin Hines out of Texas, Gene Keating, Jack Smith, many of the pioneers, that is many names, trying to think of offhand that I can name. There's some others out there. Greg Gentry, the Angela Stark with My Private Audio, kudos to her. Brett Jones, Legal Redress Commission, the work that he's done. Numerous list of others. I mean, the list goes on, that this information is real, contrary to popular belief, with naysayers, gatekeepers, minions, and mean-spirited people. Some will have you believe they don't want you looking into this information, but there is a legitimate side. There is real, if you do know what you're doing, how to execute things properly. And that's why I do give a disclaimer. I encourage everyone to be responsible, to govern yourselves accordingly, by the way, when it comes to this type of information. I also want to say, on a side note, many are unaware when they first start studying this type of information, there are different processes that are set up too, by the way. And there's a book that I brought with me tonight. I want to illustrate an example I almost forgot about, by the way. It's called Business and the Law. In some college, it's taught in a college class called Business and Law. By the way, it makes some of the titles, and you can pull. This is an older, looks like a workbook. So there may have been like a hardback book that went with this book. But I want to say the story, I mentioned this a while ago in some of the earlier redemption videos that I did covering some of the books. And I wanted to go over the credibility of why to debunk what this gatekeeper and some other minions and deep state underlinks out there are fabricating lies and information about the UCC financing statement. I'm gonna put that to rest. The evidence is in this book. Did you know that this is taught in colleges and major universities and written by people that have master's degrees and PhDs that write these books? This book deals with commerce. Now, these different college classes educate you on various things like history, science, depends on what you're going to, but specific fields like maybe people who are going to school to be lawyers, in certain professions, accounting, finance, they might be required to take this course. Like, I do have a college background. I am college educated. I have an associate's degree. Even though I didn't finish on my bachelor's, I took credits going towards my bachelor's. I was 13 classes away if I decided to go back when I checked some years ago. But I was going to take this class down the line. I was getting ready to. I hadn't got there yet, but I discovered from investigating this information, from the type of investigative research that I do, this book talks about filing UCC financing statements. And this is an older version, has like a copy. A financing statement, people make it out more than what it is. It's putting the state on notice that you have an interest in a property, a security interest, and you're giving notice. And there's different types of notifications. There's a private notifications, there's private liens, there's public liens. I won't get into all that because I did give a disclaimer. This is not legal advice. However, I want to debunk that with some of these gatekeepers and people, minions out here trying to tell you, and in certain states where they said they're trying to intimidate people and say you can't file a UCC. This is part of regular commerce. They're trying to hide this information from people. So the reason I brought this book, not only does this book cover talk about UCC financing statements, and I've looked at other versions of the book because and just to empower you all, just the type of research that I do this while you can, by the way, to gather the evidence so you'll know that I'm telling the truth and I'm credible because I'm showing a real face. I'm not hiding behind a fake ghost account. You're seeing an actual person. So you're getting reputable information that's credible. I want to encourage you all to go online and see if you can find, I found already in the past, a lot of different PDF files. You may have to find, there's certain sites like maybe Scribs, and there might be other sites where you can get for free, you can download, and they have PDF files on business and the law, by the way. And then I scroll down, and some of the chapters, one of the chapters in particular had a whole chapter on the UCC. So these gatekeepers are trying to make this stuff out to be like this is some type of made up rumor or myth. No, I remember years ago a guy that someone I knew privately, whose name I won't say to protect their identity, confirmed with me. There was an individual who came to the classes that we used to attend years ago and said he took this in college. And I discovered he was probably referring to this class. He probably he may not have known the class, but he told a friend of mine that I took this in college before. Well, I discovered from my research that this information, a lot of the stuff that is studied in the redemption movement or education, referred to also as so-called sovereign citizen, which I don't use that term. That is an umbrella term that's used to discredit people and discredit this type of information. Is actually it deals with being a private citizen or a member of or pertaining to the private side. I won't necessarily go into all the details because these different topics branch into other subjects, but to try to stay on topic, to stay on course, just to give you guys a basic idea, the information, a lot of it that's related to redemption education is in this book, by the way. And this is not hidden. This is actually on a collegiate level taught at many college universities, by the way. It has been in the past. And as you guys can obviously see, this is an older book right here, by the way. Just to scroll through, there was also a chapter on negotiable instruments. By the way, I'll see if I can find so I can just kind of hold it up to the camera and share it with you guys. But I was downtown one day with someone that I know in the years past, and there was a bookstore that gives away books, like old books that people I guess don't want. Sometimes people donate, drop books off. It's like a lot of bookworms go down there. I was told years ago that people said they can find rare books sometimes that are not sold or no longer in print anymore. And that's where I happened to stumble across this book one time. And I was the type of guy that didn't really like to read years ago. But when I started learning this information, I started soaking things up like a sponge, and it forced me to do a lot of reading, by the way, and research naturally, by the way. So I'm just sharing as a courtesy the evidence that this information is legitimate, even on the public side. And there's gatekeepers, people lying, giving false, misleading information out here that's trying to accuse this information of being a conspiracy theory. And I want to debunk that and tell you that is not true. There is a legitimate side to this information pertaining to sovereignty, redemption. By the way, I believe I found, okay, here's the, I'll try to hold it up to the camera. By the way, I don't know how well you guys can see. This is a financing statement. It's showing an example in here. There's a whole chapter that is on the UCC, by the way. And I'm trying to find the chapter just to show you guys. Hold it up. I don't want to spend too much time because I have a lot of information to cover, by the way. Okay, this chapter is called The Law of Commercial Paper, by the way. Now, this chapter, Law of Commercial Paper, this deals with negotiable instruments. And that's a whole nother topic within itself. I kind of touched on that in the past about negotiable instruments, and it shows different site drafts in here. Now, this is something that was common knowledge, but because a lot of gatekeepers and people who work in city government haven't been trained on this type of information, does not mean that is a scam. It's because people were not being taught this. Modern day society is really dumbed down. People are not being properly educated, as this book is showing different various templates in here on negotiable instruments. You see, it's like people or think when they listen sometimes to some of these gatekeepers, they think that this stuff is a scam, and I'm here to debunk that, to prove to you, no, it's not. This information is real. This is not a financial cult. It's not a regular cult. This is very real information, and it deals with commerce, how you conduct business. By the way, this book also covers intellectual property. That deals with like when you run your names in the newspaper, copyrights, and if you have a legal background, there's ways to enforce that. Very powerful. There's some out there who are heavier in the law than I am, because I'm not trying one of those type of people that's trying to take credit. I'm just sharing with you all what I've researched as a courtesy to validate the legitimacy of this information, contrary to popular belief. But to get back on the topic of the video, which is double entry bookkeeping, decedent estate lost at sea. The decedent is the in lingus in the court system. That's the term. You want to look up the definition of in lingus. You're actually doing business as that individual. When your parents gave you that legal name when you were born, a government name, as some may call it, when you were signed over to the state, and it was a process they went through where the hospital had so much time to get that over to the county, to the Department of Vital Statistics, then goes to Washington, D.C. Department of Commerce, and the Federal Reserve takes out a loan where they pledge you as collateral and takes out a loan to print up, I guess, part of new currency. That's why I have a note. Some of you all have this same information. There's a document. There was actual congressional session. I have the evidence. I have to locate it, but they had said some years ago the money is backed by the people, and they literally mean that. They actually have some of this stuff is like coded, it's hidden because people have not researched this or just simply don't know. You can't fault people for not knowing, by the way, and I'm still learning. There's nothing wrong with that, with learning, but I'm here to debunk some of those myths out there, once again, that this information is real. So you have debits and credit in accounting. And to give you an example, a decedent estate is like when someone dies, someone collects the assets owned by the decedent. And notice that after, sometimes they have to pay the debts and taxes owed before the property that gets transferred to them, by the way. But however, while we're alive, did you know, if we haven't done certain steps to claim that, properly claim control of that estate, that legal person, by the way, we're considered lost at sea. That's why that's in the title. They're using admiralty, which is military, and maritime is law of the seas, a maritime jurisdiction. So even as we're alive, they have us listed privately as lost at sea, dead. And if your family members that's why sometimes when people die, if no loved ones, no one claims the estate, it goes back to the state that individual resided in, whoever they were, for example. So notice that part of balancing the books, they have to settle someone, whoever wants to, let's say if it was even a relative that's trying to get access to the home that was owned, even if it was that person had a will and they passed it down to them. But if that person, that decedent, died and they still owe taxes on that property, or like debts, and it could even be in the form of to lawyers, the family or whoever they're supposed to go to is responsible for settling that debt until then the property won't be transferred to them, the remaining party or parties entitled to the property. But I just wanted to show you very similar, just like the public side, there's a private side. We're dealing with reason it's double entry bookkeeping. There's two sides, public and private. There's assets, liabilities. There's a private side ledger dealing with your QSIP, your exemption account, your social security number without the dashes. That is the auto tris. That's the QSIP. There's Committee on Uniform Securities Identification Procedures. Also, it's synonymous with Committee on Uniform Securities Identifying the Principal. And that's a whole other topic. And look up those terms, principal, and principal. There's distinct differences in some of these terminologies too, and even pertaining to the court. What the courts use, for example, they use legalese, by the way, which I'm going to try. I had some notes on that for example, to go over really quick. Remember, this is why in the court system, legalese is in an entirely different language. Remember, it was years ago, it was against the law for slaves to read. This is why the establishment wants to keep many individuals illiterate. In our modern day society, some say slavery is going on in a different form, which it is. Good evening. I'm gonna get to the chat to acknowledge you guys. By the way, thank you all for joining. This is Q&A. Also, if you have any statements, questions, just to put it out there, now is the best time to ask me before later on in the video, before I close things down. This is the best time to reach me. So just putting it out there. Don't be afraid. Do not hesitate to ask any questions. I will, when I finish up with this part, try to get to the chat section and acknowledge you all, by the way. So just going back over, this is why in the court system, the establishment, when they use legalese, which I hear years ago, Latin was taken out the school system. It was mandatory at one time, but they wanted to dumb the population down. They didn't want people to be in power, because we really should have been taking, it should have been mandatory. We should have been taking a civics class since middle school. I would even say elementary school. We should have been learning the law, where you know, there's ways to represent yourself where you don't always have to have a lawyer. Now, I know some things are sophisticated where people don't want to go through all the headache and rigmarole, and it's just easier for them to hire a lawyer. But there's consequences I want to go over with that, is in these contractual agreements. For example, members of the Bar Association enjoy a higher rank above regular citizens. That P number they're issued through their county, that gives them the ability to practice. This is a sense of dual citizenship, by the way. When they take on a client, did you know when you hire an attorney, you're declaring yourself incompetent? Let me say that again. When you hire an attorney or lawyer, you're saying I'm incompetent to handle my commercial affair. So you know what you're doing? That estate, dealing with the double entry bookkeeping, when you sign your signature, you know you're giving them power of attorney. You've ever heard of power of attorney, by the way? So the lawyer you hired has been given power of attorney to administer your estate, aka your legal person trust account, through acquiescence of your signature, your John Hancock, your signature through acquiescence, by the way. So just keep that in mind, that there's hidden contracts. And this is evident within the court system, by the way. So I've got some more notes here. I'm just looking through. Well, in the meantime, I'm going to jump to the chat section real quick to acknowledge you guys. Thank you all for joining. In case you're here, you're watching Dorsey's Resource. I'm now currently live, by the way. Okay, RC says, yes, it's just a notice stored in their repository filing format, non-UCC if you want to store it privately, or UCC if you want to store it with them to record. Yes, one is public registration, is public notice. Like they say, one is a notice of a lien, another is an actual lien. Some would say, and it depends, like, because there's different processes. The non-UCC is a private form of a lien, and you know, you can still file that. There's a particular way too, but there's where even if it was in your possession, you have established record. But there's another way that is filed in the database to give like public notice or public record that can be effective too. I've heard from different heavy hitters in the movement. I'll say, leave it at that, by the way. So there's, just keep in mind, there are different processes. Terry McLaughlin says, evening, Dorsey. Good evening to you, Terry. Thank you for joining. Trip D says, fire, fire. Okay, thank you. Hashtag. Okay. Oh, that was all. Okay. So to get back on topic to the video, the notes that I have to give you all an idea, I went over, if you keep in mind, if you hire an attorney or public defender or defense counsel, they have the ability also to use your signature behind your back, even in cases where you think they support you or they'll pretend to be your friend. They use your signature without permission. So once after you have agreed to contract with them, like you've given them power of attorney, the court once they make a claim against you, there's $2 to $10 million per charge on the private side. That's why even with the bonds and stuff like that, where people can come up with, like they say, 10%, because if you know about fractional reserve banking, that is similar to how the Federal Reserve can loan up to 90% of what you have on deposit. So say if you have 10,000 on deposit, they can loan up to 90%, which would be 90,000. That's fractional reserve banking, by the way. So in the court system, they allow you for the bonds. In many cases, if you are granted bond, you're able to put down at least 10%. That's fractionalization process. It's not a coincidence. The courts have something called the CRIS accounts, court registry investment system, and that's connected to the Federal Reserve, just like the CAFR funds with the county. That CAFR is an acronym for Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, by the way. So just keep that in mind. So the public defender or counsel is when they ask you for your social security number, you've already given your acquiescence through your signature. They can cash in off your account. They can collect. In many cases, these jobs that we're working, where we think they're paying us for the labor, we're actually behind on the private side. We're paying them. By the way, it's all going through the DTC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation. By the way, now there is a process that the employer, a lot of times, like with the payroll department, where they're issue the money ahead of time, like a loan, and then they'll have a lot of times a high yield account where they'll get interest as well. But there's another thing on the private side. There's credits that's going into your private ledger side, and it's stated that the jobs just determine how many credits you they feel how much that job is worth, by the way. And job can be just over broke or for whatever your career may be, but behind the scenes you're paying yourself, by the way, through your account attached to the DTC and the FRB, by the way. You know, it all goes back to your signature, and notice your SSN. For those out there who will tell you that you don't have a secret account, this, that, and the other, that is not necessarily the case, by the way. There is some truth to that, despite the reversals and things that were happening, by the way. So what's going on is many of these courthouses and government institutions are committing fraud or abusing their authority when they're not reporting taxes, by the way. That's why if you have someone who's wronged you, they say that it's important to file with the IRS. They have a form called the 3949A. I believe that's a suspicious activity report form. They also have a whistleblower form. You go to irs.gov. The reason you do this is so the IRS can have oversight in the matter, because many of these courthouses, city government, are banking, but they're doing it where they're committing fraud. For example, when these entities collect cash from you and they don't give you a receipt, by the way, this allows these government courthouses to not have a paper trail. Even when it's digital, they can cook the books. So that's why you hear the FBI coming in some of these different city municipalities or whatever, auditing their records and stuff, because in many cases, they're doing these egregious acts. And I was aware of this information because this was already happening to a lot of people in the redemption movement many years ago, by the way, because I have experience knowing about this some years, despite what these gatekeepers out there are lying, giving false, misleading information that is not accurate. But at Dorsey's Resource, you have a real person that's not hiding behind a fake account. Be careful behind listening to people that never show a real face and never give a real name. Those are gatekeepers, trolls. They may even be shills out there, and agents and minions, and they're also known as underlings, henchmen. Some of these people are mean-spirited people that don't want you to learn the truth, where I'm giving you the tools to research, to empower yourself, by the way. And these other gatekeepers who want you to believe them, that want you to believe that real facts matter, but they never show a real face and never show a real name. Just something to think about there. So I'm going to be your resource, by the way. That's why I named the video, I named my channel what it is, Dorsey's Resource. So this allows them to alter the digital or electronic records, could possibly be altered, and they don't have a paper trail. So you want to have oversight sometimes when you file these forms with the IRS, Internal Revenue Service, because they're not getting their cut sometimes. The Internal Revenue Service because these institutions are not reporting the taxes, and they're more required because they're operating on the statutory side. All public corporations are supposed to follow public law. You know, let me say that again. All public corporations are supposed to follow public law. Unlike me and you, we go home after the job operating in your private capacity. There's a distinct difference if you know about the non-statutory side, by the way. But these institutions, it's more up to them to be accountable, by the way. So just something to keep in mind, by the way. Okay, I'm going to get back to the once again. So yeah, they're supposed to be more responsible for providing transparency, accountability. So there are checks and balances in place required to keep them from abusing the public. This is from fraud, misconduct. This is why you see a lot of these corruption cases, by the way, in different city municipalities across the country, by the way, because they're supposed to be transparent. They're already operating in the public. They're supposed to be public servants. They don't have delegation of authority properly, if you know what you're doing, to make a legal determination of your affair when you're operating from in the right capacity, by the way. See, there's things, loopholes they don't want. They're playing these games out here, by the way. So let me get to the chat section and acknowledge you guys. I just want to try to be thorough. Okay. Okay. RC says, always do a restrictive endorsement on any / everything. Blank endorsement is all power, which you don't want to do. Thank you for that, RC. Yes, I've done that before. I've run into some resistance too from gatekeepers, because another thing they bet on, they put you in a catch-22 situation. I really don't have the time to go into the details. By the way, I may have to get back, but I have a webinar on that. It's important to purchase webinars. There's people out there that do sell webinars, classes, to get updated on the information, because they do change things, by the way. And nowadays, because of technology, there's certain places they do an excellent job with the webinars, different content creators, by the way. Okay, stand by, guys. Hold on.
Robert.
Castleton.
That's good. Copy. Radio check complete. 0100.
Okay. All right. Getting back to the chat. Andrew Martin says, just subscribed. I've been involved. We're doing this for about 15 years. What do you think these trade deals have to do with this? By the way, not sure what you're referring to. The trade deals, by the way, specifically are you referring to in relation, if you're still watching, Martin, in relation to the redemption education? By the way, are you referring to the GCR, the global currency reset? I'm not sure which you're referring to when you said about these trade deals, by the way, but I'll tell you just some basics dealing with the big corporations. They formed many super conglomerates and things. They're outsourcing jobs overseas. This is taught in economics class, by the way, where the difference with President Trump, he's a nationalist. He's trying to restore the strength with the local economy for the country itself, because with big corporations such as Apple, GM, they have factories overseas, and then they can pay cheaper labor instead of hiring their own Americans, the people who were behind implementing these corporations. And the strength, it allows corporations to be cheap, cut costs and things of that sort, and this doesn't help the people. And then there was something set up years ago where based on the trades that other countries do, the United States our country itself was not getting a good cut, but however, they would charge us an exorbitant amount of money when it came to goods and services, but it was not equal when it came to what we were getting from them. But it was like so he's trying to make it even exchange, no robbery. to make it clear. So this is why maybe some things went up that we pay for, but you know, down the road because of inflation, things are bound to happen anyway. But he's trying to make things more fair. And in terms of trade deals, like when I hear the China deal or whatever is important, that's pertaining to the reset. I'm not an expert when it comes to that. I did give a disclaimer, but just my opinion. I do understand where it plays a role because different countries do commerce with each other. This is part of why I showed this book in general called Business and the Law. It's related to redemption education, by the way, because we're doing commerce. This book teaches you about commerce, which involves contracts. By the way, there was a chapter in here on commercial paper, which deals with negotiable instruments. UCC financing statements chapter is generally called secure transactions. By the way, there's another chapter that's related to this information called, I believe, intellectual property. And intellectual property deals with if you're filing DBAs or trademarks, which is also copyrights, which is also important pertaining to this information, by the way. So I'm going to get to the rest of the chat to try to acknowledge the rest of you guys' statements. So thank you for your remark, Andrew Martin. Chucky Tronic says, why is everyone that teaches this poor? Very good question. By the way, I could explain that, Chucky. One of the reasons is because these gatekeepers and minions, remember, and actually ruling class elite at the very top, keep this information very secretive. I would recommend, Chucky, do your due diligence. Look up Pastor Lindsey Williams. I'm not trying to get religious on you, but he came out as a whistleblower some years ago. He lived with the some members of the ruling class elite, I guess a particular faction, and came out as a whistleblower. He's done books, DVDs. He did one in particular. It still might be on YouTube for free. You can watch for free. I don't know if it still is. Don't quote me on it. It's called Secrets of the Elite. I would highly recommend watching that film. If you do, you can also go back to my channel. I did an older video called Secrets of the Elite, and it would help explain that, Chucky, by the way, and what some of these gatekeepers and minions are doing. There is a reason, by the way, but you know, we don't want to be from a mentality where we're defeated. There is hope, and they did have to provide remedy and recourse. And unfortunately, in some cases, you do have to sue them to get your freedom. They're trying to block access to our freedom. And that's why I'm showing the legitimate side, by the way, and the egregious crimes that many of these corporations, institutions are committing, not just gatekeepers and minions, but, you know, by not following the laws that they're supposed to abide by. And even by them being statutory, they're supposed to be even more transparent, more accountable, and checks and balances, by the way. Third-party intervener on behalf of the debtor in court. Yes, says Chucky Trotter, says, pay your bills, man. It says the rest is dog and pony show. Okay, RC says also your signature should show what title/capacity. Don't do a naked signature that creates an issue of liability that you don't want to be tied to naturally. Yes, that is correct. Very important. Thank you for that comment, RC. It's very important how we sign our name. As you brought up earlier, the restrictive endorsement and that information you can research online. I encourage everyone to look up the definitions. Chucky says all crimes are commercial. Yes, that is true. There is a certain amount of money tied to every crime. Yes, it's all civil. Yes, that is true. You know, even though they have civil, different types of jurisdiction, civil versus criminal, by the way, but it's still all commercial. You're being sued for commercial dishonor. Yes, that is true. Terry says, this is for Chucky Tronis, just asking, but what are you talking about and who are you talking about being sued? It says, when you commit a crime, you're being sued for not paying the bill. All crimes are commercial. Yes, that is true. Terry says, thumbs up, right on. You should be coming into court as a third-party intervener on behalf of the debtor. And I also want to say, Chucky, just as I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you have been here following since I started the video, but to newbies out there, a lot of people may not be aware, there are different processes in this movement. So keep in mind, there's different things that have worked. There's a saying, different strokes for different folks. There's even pertaining to how people defend themselves or go into court. There's even a procedure where some people avoid the courts. There's a way to contract some things I won't share because it's just too sensitive, because some people are not responsible enough. I've shared with some people privately, by the way, and I've seen things even on the local news to substantiate that evidence, and I could go over that, but to also protect the integrity of this information, because there are people with bad intentions, gatekeepers out here, minions and underlings and henchmen that don't have good intentions. I don't share some of that, some of the specifics of that, but just keep in mind there are different procedures, different processes. So that's why I do give a disclaimer. It's up to everyone to do their own homework. We all are competent adults. It's important to be competent. I went over the reason dealing with if you hire a lawyer, what the consequences are, dealing with power of attorney, by the way. So just keep in mind there are different ways if you do go into court. It says you are the creditor on the private side. Yes, that is true. Andrew Martin says phase 1, 2, and 3 trade deals with China, Mexico, Canada, etc. Brexit. Okay. Thank you for that statement, Andrew. Terry McLaughlin says, okay, Andrew says, are you aware of Thomas Buckley and the Omega Project? I may have heard of it before. I'm not familiar. Feel free to elaborate, Andrew, on who Thomas Buckley and Omega Project is. I'm not familiar with it. May have heard the term, but I can't say exactly. But feel free to elaborate. It says, I've been hearing that phase 1 was all about helping out farmers who were the ones who got after the hardest. Phase 2 and 3 our mix should be when we see ours. Okay, I guess that may pertain to the reset. I did hear about the farmers claim. Also, that movie called Changes on the Horizon, parts 1 through 3, you can watch for free on YouTube. Will help clarify that and provide evidence behind that reset information dealing with the GCR. Lady T says, hey, greetings, Lady T. It's been a minute. Good seeing you. Says, hey, much respect, always love. How do we file a claim on what's ours? Our family or state with no paper trail in hand, and family members who have passed, and you are the only era that what can be done lost at sea. Wow, that's a lot to unpack there, Lady T. A lot to unpack for the video. I'm on limited time, by the way. I did say I will try to do my level best to answer the questions, by the way, but it's important to go over the videos that I've done, screen capture videos, to remove certain contracts, so you would have to be at the capacity to operate the estate effectively without re-entering into contracts of that sort. Dealing with family estate, by the way, you can shoot me an email at dorsey'sresource2017@gmail.com. That's dorsey'sresource2017@gmail.com, by the way. And I can try to provide, more clarification, because in that particular statement, there's a lot to unpack there that goes very in depth. When you say with no paper trail, it depends, because some of this stuff gets into like a higher level where you have to be proficient with operating trust, and not knowing about the non-statutory trust and the specific types of trust that the elites use. And I can provide a little bit, I don't want to say some things on here because YouTube is obviously too public, by the way. But that is a high-powered question. But thank you for the question, Lady T, by the way. And dealing with lost at sea, there's different tools to remove yourself, by the way, and claim. And that is part of what some of the things that I've gone over already, by the way. But I would say shoot me an email, Lady T. Put that question in the email, and I can tackle that question, to the best of my ability for each part, by the way. Chucky says all corporations use private commercial paper. Okay. Yes. You have the GSA forms as well. That stands for General Services Administration. There's a lot of information here to unpack. So I'm going to get ready to shut things down, family. I see you guys are going deep in here, by the way. But I appreciate the comments. It says, my family woke me up when I was 7 years old. It's my life's mission to see these uppers in jail or beheaded. Okay, I understand. Yep, because they've committed a lot of very egregious crimes. The sad part is some of the ones that are responsible for delaying or stalling the reset, because there was a meeting that was done with the bad guys years ago, and they agreed when they met with the good guys to, they were supposed to make this occur. And they violated, according to Pastor Lindsey Williams, he mentioned how the elites have a code of ethics, and they violated that code, so they've done very egregious crimes. So I understand your pain, your frustration, by the way. Hopefully they will be honorable, because there's consequences, there's spiritual laws that are violated, not just, there's things in the natural, and Yusuf El did a good job where he's done a breakdown. Go to his channel, he's broken down differences between natural law, administrative law, commercial law, and things of that sort, and honor and dishonor. By the way, that also pertains to contracts and dealing with commerce, by the way. Warhawk 7100 Warhawk says, what up, my brother? Good to see you. Thank you, Warhawk. Greetings to you. Trip D says UCC 1-308. Yes, UCC 1-308 stands for Michigan, the state I'm in. That's codified in reference to Michigan Compile Law MCL.1308. States, in connection with my signature, I've reserved my common law right not to be compelled to perform any unrevealed contract or commercial agreement that I did not enter into knowingly, voluntarily, and intentionally. And furthermore, I do not accept the compelled benefit of any unrevealed contract or commercial agreement. It's important to memorize and know that law, by the way, pertaining to your signature. Trip D says special appearance. Yep, special appearance is correct, but you must put it on the record in open court, or they will ignore it and count it general. I can operate public and private. Tony Benson Mahuka says, aloha, Dorsey. Greetings to you. Thank you for joining, Tony Benson. Kudos to you. Common law trust. Okay. Laugh out loud. John Doe says, you don't appear. You make a special visitation because there was public meeting scheduled by an executor, D. Sun Tort. Now, just keep in mind, once again, guys, as I said earlier, when it comes to these procedures dealing with the court, for newbies out there, I know this information can be sophisticated. That's why I'm here to try to serve as like a translator, to try to translate the information, to interpret it for you guys, so it makes sense. There are different processes and different procedures. Everyone at the end of the day has to decide what process is best for them. To different individuals who share the information, teach the information as a courtesy out here, by the way. Not all these processes are created the same. I have heard success stories from different processes. Even from I've heard secured party creditor process still works. I was contacted by a subscriber who stated she has over 90% success. It was just one particular instance. Someone was giving her a hard time, but they were criminally doing misconduct, by the way. But she said other than that, she had a 90% success rate because what she was doing was highly accurate. And she was using SPC, which stands for Secure Party Creditor. So there's different processes, different procedures, depending on the level you're at, who you studied under. So just keep that in mind, by the way. And that's why also I gave a disclaimer. This is not legal advice. These are simply my opinions, sharing as a courtesy from my experience. Chuck says you can make a special appearance if you appoint the judge as a trustee. Trip D says thumbs up. If you don't show up, they will put a warrant out for your arrest. The straw they think is you. Okay, it depends on what that matter is pertaining to. Hey, truth be told, look on Manta. There are 17 people in the chat. Reminds me everyone here should know about Q by now. Unrebutted affidavit stands as truth. They are all private businesses. Yeah, now I would acknowledge you guys just to let you know, FYI, in the chat more often. Sometimes when I do a video, I don't get as many people in the chat or as many statements. Some of you all are more advanced than other people, by the way, so just keep that in mind as well. But with that said, I appreciate you guys. I'm on a time restraint. Of course, by the way, I'm at what I call the slavery plantation, involuntary servitude, I like to call it, by the way. And the go over the title of what this video was called, double entry bookkeeping, the decedent estate lost at sea. Before I shut things down, I went over how there's two-sided system with the en lingus you're doing business as, and it's in accounting. You have debits and credit. Assets versus liabilities. There's a dual ledger based system. There's a public side and there's a private side. Statutory versus non-statutory. You have accounts payable, accounts receivable. You also have something called notes payable ledger based. There's a private company, I believe Payne and Weber. There may be some others out there audit the private side books of banks that specifically handle the private side ledger. The private side ledger of your in lingus, by the way, your Social Security Sestacute Trust is the front part. The foreign situs represents the numbers on the back, by the way. But the exemption account, you also have what's referred to as an auto trust in accounting, is the exemption. That's your SSN without the dashes. That's when you want to use your exemption account. But many of us are being blocked because we're listed as lost at sea because we haven't properly claimed and taken back over our state, even as we're alive. They have you listed as dead. Just like with the birth certificate, they make money off that. They also create a death certificate when people die, by the way. And if the family members don't claim it, it goes back to the state after a certain time period, by the way. So even as we're alive, they have us listed civically dead, lost at sea. There's some other things I didn't get a chance to touch on. Some people who are fighting the case because it was some criminal things that was done where we couldn't be competent as infants when we were born to make a competent decision. And there's some things pertaining to that was criminally done, and it should not be this difficult for some of us who are trying to transition and access our freedom. However, but I wanted to provide insight for you guys, by the way, dealing with the in lingus decedent estate balance in the books, because they're using admiralty of maritime as law of the seas, admiralty as military, by the way. And these concepts go back to Roman ecclesiastical law, older time periods, where like the captain of the ship years ago had to provide for the port authority what was called a certificate of manifest, which was the ship's height, the weight, the color, very similar to your driver's license, how it has to list your weight, your height, your color, when you were born. The certificate, the captain had to provide years ago for the port authority what was called a certificate of manifest. That's why when you're late for work, they're going to dock you. When you arrive at the ship arrived at a dock, they're using a maritime, which dealt with birthing. So that's why you get a birth certificate. So when the ship pulled into a dock, that was considered birthing. When the Statute of Liberty, when you see liberty doesn't necessarily mean freedom. These terms have a dual meaning from what we've been taught. Liberty is actually privilege. Liberty is what a sailor gets, by the way, they use in the Navy when it's permission. By the way, it's like when you ask your parents or your mom or dad, hey, mom, dad, can I use the car? Can I use the keys? You're asking permission. Liberty is not, when you see the Statute of Liberty, they tricked us, many Americans, it's not freedom. They've tricked us into being good U.S. corporate citizens, by the way, to be lost at sea. They brainwashed us, you see. So these terms, this is why it's important to distinguish why I'm going over. I didn't go over, I did a previous video where I went over the definitions, but I've already went over a lot of time, by the way. So I'm getting ready to shut things down, but I meant maybe the next video, if you guys remind me, I can go over the definitions again. Some of these terms you can look up, but these concepts go back years ago. Also, the in lingus dealt with the capitis diminutio maxima, that dealt with all caps, capitis diminutio minima, that dealt with the lowercase names, going back to, Roman times. When a person was deceased, their name was on a casket put in all capital letters, by the way. Notice on tombstones, that's not a coincidence. When you look at all your contracts, your driver's license, social security card, it's not a coincidence. It's in all caps. Now, some people will try to argue on some contracts it's not that way, but most of them, they are. Even bills and stuff. It's not a coincidence. It's all caps. It still will tie into a computer system or database, even if they try to do upper and lowercase sometimes to trick you, by the way. When you haven't properly changed your status, by the way, just to drop a few jewels, because they have us listed lost at sea. Those of us who are trying to exit the matrix, by the way. So they're using double entry bookkeeping. There's a private side, accounting ledger. Private side of the books, it's also called double entry bookkeeping. So the judges, the concept again, the birthing, the captain of the ship had to provide for the port authority a certificate of manifest that was called birthing. So the concept was like when your mother gives birth to you, the ship pulls into a dock. That's why when you're late for work, they're going to dock you. You have a doctor, a doc, the ship parked at a dock, by the way. The doctor has to provide, after the birth certificate, he has to get it signed within so much time after you're born. So it can get passed, the hospital can turn it over to the county, then they can turn it over to the Department of Vital Statistics, where it can go to the Department of Commerce in Washington, D.C., where from there, the Federal Reserve pledges you as collateral and issues a loan, because a bond has to have a collateral asset backing it. We're dealing with securities now. This is not financial brokerage advice, though, but I'm just giving you guys an understanding to connect the pieces. This is why studying the webinars, the classes are important, by the way. And Dorsey's resources here also to clear up some of the rumors, the mythology. And you got to question why some of these gatekeepers that try to claim and fabricate information have never shared this information before, by the way. So I just wanted to show you guys this information is legitimate. It is real, by the way. And I know it's kind of heavy, but with that said, I've said a mouthful for you guys. I thank you all for your time. I'm your host, John Dorsey. You can follow me on Facebook at Dorsey's Resource. I'm on Twitter at Dorsey's Resource. I'm also on Minds.com. By the way, I'm obviously on YouTube at Dorsey's Resource. Don't forget to give me a thumbs up if you can. Also, if you're not subscribed, you want to hit the notification bell, so whenever I put out new videos, YouTube will notify you in the upper right hand corner whenever I put out new content and when I'm going live. So you guys will have a heads up. Even if you're on YouTube, you're watching another video, you'll see, hey, I'm going live. You can jump right over. So I appreciate you guys' time. Thank you guys for joining. Until next time, everyone have a blessed night. Take care.